Well, welcome back, and I am delighted and quite frankly honored to have his time. Dr. Jerome Corsi is with us today, and he's a WorldNet Daily senior staff reporter, and you perhaps have caught some of his books, and we value the relationship that we have with him, the time that he gives us. And what caught my attention, and the reason I wanted to have him on today, his last 3 articles, they're all great. You ought to check them out at WorldNet Daily. Healthcare.gov, can't verify Obama's identity. Healthcare used to elevate gay lifestyle. And the national ID headed for your wallet and purse. These are just some of the things that he's commenting on. So I want to get into some of these topics with Dr. Corsi this morning. Happy New Year, my friend. Good to see you.
Happy New Year to you, too, as well. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thanks for your time. I know you're busy, and really an honor to have you with us again. These articles, Dr. Corsi, are just phenomenal. Let's deal with the first one. How embarrassing was it for the president not to sign on?
Well, I think, it was a big deal. The White House was supposed to get President Obama to, President Obama resisted signing on to Obamacare, and everybody said, why wouldn't he set an example? Why wouldn't he be the first to sign on? And then finally, after all this prodding, the White House agreed Obama would sign on when he went out to Hawaii, and it turned out Obama couldn't sign on. The people back at the White House tried to sign on for him. As best as I can figure out, the only piece of ID you need is your Social Security number. And Obama's Social Security number evidently did not verify in the Obamacare system. Of course, we knew that. We had, going back even a couple of years ago, had various readers and researchers who could not verify on the E-Verify system, which is the checking whether or not somebody's legally here for purposes of employment. Obama's Social Security number would not E-Verify either. So the White House very embarrassedly put out this cover story that, there were databases that were privy to the president, and this was a high security operation, so the White House staff had to go to an in-person facility for Obamacare and enroll him personally. It's all nonsense. The only piece of information you need to enroll in Obamacare is Social Security number, and that's the one piece of identification that will not verify for sure for Obama. His selective service card wouldn't verify. I mean, I've been writing about this for years. Almost all of Obama's primary documentation is bogus, has problems to it, the Social Security Administration says the number Obama's been using, including filing tax reports on, was not issued to Barack Obama. And of course, the mainstream media just ignores all this information, but it's out there and has been out there publicly for years.
So, are you saying he doesn't have a Social Security number of his own, or is he using somebody else's?
Well, the number Barack Obama is using was issued in the 1970s to someone who lived in Connecticut. In those years, the first 3 numbers of the Social Security number were reserved for the area in which you applied. And this number was reserved when it was issued for Connecticut. And Obama had never been in Connecticut. He had never been there to apply from Connecticut. And then subsequently, Social Security Administration, in response to an inquiry from another researcher, indicated that that number was not issued to Barack Obama. So they wouldn't tell us who it was issued to, but they said it was not issued to Barack Obama. So from the best I can tell, and of course the Obama campaigns would never answer these questions. The Obama White House will never answer these questions. They get ignored. Had they been about George W. Bush, the New York Times would have hired 30 reporters to do nothing else but report on this. But because Barack Obama, the mainstream media does not want to cover the fact that he has a fraudulent ID. And Barack Obama's basic identity, I think, is a fictional identity. It looks to me like a CIA creation, and it always has.
Wow.
But his selective service number isn't correct. It was falsified. Sheriff Arpaio's investigators proved that. His Social Security number was not issued to Barack Obama. It does not work on E-Verify or other government systems to validate Social Security numbers. So we don't really know who Barack Obama is, to be absolutely honest with you.
Wow. So he didn't get on. He didn't sign up for his own.
Well, I'm sure they figured out one way or another to get him on and bypass the fraudulent Social Security. He also files taxes under this Social Security number. So, the government's been accepting it. It just was not issued to Barack Obama, and there's no way it was his number to begin with.
Wow. Unbelievable. Absolutely. It's just astounding. Well, we've watched this Obamacare just implode in so many ways. There's rumors now that they're thinking about hiring a CEO to manage this mess.
Well, they can hire whoever they want. They're not going to fix this mess. This mess is a disaster. I mean, it was never designed to work. It was designed to fail. The whole construction of Obamacare is a political agenda, and it's all designed to redistribute the costs of health care, not so that the poor are given health care. That does not seem to be the major objective here. The major objective, as far as I can figure out, the only really, the poor have health care costs and needs that are, somewhat dissimilar from the population because they don't get as good housing, they don't get as good nutrition, etc. But in general, the poor are suffering basically the same rough assortments of illnesses the rest of the population does. And the poor have always been able to get medical care going into emergency rooms, or Medicare is designed for the elderly, but Medicaid is designed for the poor. I mean, you can expand Medicaid to achieve all the purposes of helping the poor, but in fact, Medicaid was cut under Obamacare. The exceptional population with health care needs, the only one really, except for, maybe people who drink too much or smoke too much or are obese, then the next category is going to be gays, HIV, the LGBT health lifestyle. And the more I've researched it over the years, I wrote 3 articles on this, the really exceptional cost, AIDS, HIV, is still primarily contacted by men having sex with men. And the second way is heterosexual women who are infected by bisexual male partners who they did not realize had homosexual activity. Intravenous drug users are there, but they're a very small proportion. And this whole problem of HIV/AIDS is disproportionately acute in the African American community. There's about 1 million people who have AIDS right now diagnosed in the United States. A vast proportion of them LGBT lifestyle. And the medical care can cost up to $500,000 a year. You're going to spend a minimum of $30,000 or $40,000 a year just for the treatments to keep someone with HIV infection alive, and probably extending their life for 20 years is going to cost about $1 million. Now that cost has got to be borne somewhere, and looking at the Obama campaign, what really caught me on this was all the efforts the Obama people were making to enroll LGBTs. I mean, there are White House conferences, White House press releases, the White House supporting this group out to enroll. I mean, the White House has made a major push in the LGBT community to get LGBT enrolled in health care. And when you look at the fact you can't any longer underwrite by risk, so you can't ask of someone what their lifestyle is, you can't know if they have AIDS as a pre-existing condition. So health insurance companies know they're going to get hit by X number of people who are going to have HIV/AIDS, and they're just going to have to pay for it. And that's, again, one of the reasons to raise the cost of health insurance for everyone, to make it distributed across the population, so the private health companies paying for the HIV infected, AIDS-infected people who enroll with them are going to have the cash to pay these very expensive treatments and distribute it across the population of other people, healthier people that they're serving.
Wow, I remember earlier on where the argument was on municipalities, maybe even small cities and towns that were self-insuring, and then here comes the AIDS issue, and they realized on a self-insuring basis they couldn't afford an employee who got it.
Well, in fact, if you look back in the history when the AIDS epidemic first started, a lot of health insurance companies who got hit by it unexpectedly. No one had known anything about AIDS prior to really 70s and 80s was when the consciousness of AIDS began to develop. Many insurance companies, like health insurers, went out of the business. They just simply priced themselves so high that no one could afford their insurance. And in fact, this is one of the other problems you've got now with Obamacare, because, again, trying to force the population as a whole to pay for AIDS medical care treatment and HIV has pushed the cost of this health insurance sky high, so that even the HIV community, the LGBT community, which is prone to this disease, is not signing up because they can't afford these high premiums. So even having gone to all this trouble to design the policy, the non-infected HIV/AIDS but at-risk population in the LGBT community can't afford the coverage. So it's really not achieving the purpose even the Obama administration thought it would. They thought, all the LGBTs would sign up because suddenly they can't get asked about lifestyle. Nobody can know if they're, practicing sexual behaviors that might induce them to get AIDS or HIV. And so therefore they would just flock to getting the insurance while they could. Well, it hasn't happened. Yeah. It hasn't happened because they can't afford it.
Right.
And that's the problem in general, is that what Obama has done is create a situation where the costs of private health insurance are just extraordinary. So, the solution, the one-payer solution after this private system crashes is that, yes, we'll probably get a universal health care program, medical paid by the government, the one-payer, but it's not going to be very good. You're not going to be able to do very much in terms of treatment. Even the HIV/AIDS community is going to have to wonder if they're going to be paid, 30, 40, 50,000 up to 500,000 a year for their treatments under a government system. Eventually, it's going to become obvious that if you're just trying to produce an insurance that'll cover the needs of the normal population, insurance companies have been doing it at an at-risk basis very effectively for decades.
Right.
But when you eliminate at-risk so that everybody's got to be covered, you can't ask people questions that are embarrassing. I mean, it really is not even about pre-existing conditions, except for this one group that does not want to get lifestyle questions asked. It does not want to be penalized on health insurance because they're going to live a lifestyle where the sexual activity of that lifestyle is still very highly correlated with a very infectious and very expensive disease, HIV/AIDS.
Let me ask you this question before we have to take a break. Do you think ultimately it'll end up with single payer, or do you think it'll implode?
Well, it's going to implode, and then the government will have to take it over. The government's going to have to step in pretty soon anyway, because the young are not signing up. The only people signing up, and the million people or so that have signed up, in any numbers appear to be people going to Medicare. And, people who weren't on Medicare or Medicaid, and they're basically saying they're defaulting into the government programs already. Now, when the private health insurers realize that they got far fewer applicants than they'd expected, and that probably a good proportion of those did have pre-existing conditions of one kind or another, they got an adverse risk pool, which is going to be very expensive to provide care for, and they won't be able to do it, private health insurance companies, unless the government just gives them massive subsidies. So we're at the edge of single payer anyway, whether it's administered through the private insurance companies or not. Unless massive numbers of healthy people paid very high premiums for health insurance they don't need, the system wouldn't work.
Seems to be where we're at the moment. One other quick question before we take a break. Do you think as this thing continues to unfold, it becomes more expensive, shows an incredible mess, and they just can't seem to manage it? Do you think politically this will create some kind of a wholesale cleaning in 2014?
Well, the Democrats are going to lose massively over this, but remember, President Obama will never repeal this law, because one of the sections in the law, as I point out, I think it's 1557, the enforcement section of the Affordable Care Act. By the way, it is not Affordable Care. That's the way the socialists like to name things. redistribute income, well, as if it were distributed unfairly to begin with by someone as a plan. I mean, these terms are always very loaded with internal meaning. Affordable care. It's not affordable care. This enforcement section grants Title VI Civil Rights Act protection to the LGBT lifestyle. First time it really grants constitutional protection of any kind or other to deviant, or what we used to consider deviant, now just a wide range of LGBT same-sex marriage, will be protected. You'll have a right to transgender. Your sexual preference and your orientation are going to be considered under the law. Currently, it is law. Regulations are being promulgated now. We've already done it. Cross the threshold that these various sexual lifestyles are as constitutionally protected as discrimination against age, or discrimination against male, female, or discrimination against race. So now we've added sexual orientation cannot be constitutionally cannot be discriminated against, so that transgender whatever has a right to whatever medical care they want. You can't fire.
All right, let me take a break. When we come back, you can think about this. Has the president, from the day he signed the bill to where the bill is today, has he changed it? And is that potentially a violation of the Constitution, i.e. an impeachable act? We'll be back with Dr. Jerome Corsi in just a moment. Okay, we're back, and our special guest today is Dr. Jerome Corsi, and he's a senior staff reporter with WorldNet Daily, WND, and let me encourage you to go to their website and read his articles and subscribe. He's in a series right now concerning Obamacare, and in particular, how Obamacare is used now to elevate the gay lifestyle, and he's been giving us that information. And Dr. Corsi, as we were going to the break, I asked you the question, or at least planted the thought in your head. There's two questions that come here. Is the bill today the same bill in detail that was signed when the president first signed it?
Absolutely not. President Obama has modified this bill by executive order any number of times, changing mandates, changing dates. By the way, all of which is unconstitutional. The president does not have the authority to modify laws passed by Congress. He has the authority only to enforce those laws. And of course, the Obama administration here and otherwise only selectively enforces the laws they want to enforce. And here with Obamacare even modifies the laws, which clearly is a impeachable offense. Now, whether Congress will have the political will to do anything about it, I doubt. I think Barack Obama will just get another pass on this like he does everything else.
All right. There was a DNC put out an email over the weekend that had the word impeachment on it, basically saying as a fear tactic, we need to get Democrats elected in 2014 so that the Republicans won't impeach them. I don't think the Republicans have the fortitude to do anything that courageous, but it appears that is certainly on the minds of some people.
Well, it's certainly a good campaign technique for the Democrats. They don't have much left. I mean, this Obamacare is a disaster. Millions of people have lost their insurance. People show up at their doctors starting on January 1st or 2nd. They don't know what care they're going to get. People are going to be turned away. They're going to have to pay bills. I mean, this is going to be a nightmare for the next, I don't know how long, maybe forever. But the healthcare system is just completely in shambles. And the Democrats know that the cost of this, even if the president won't be impeached, because again, the Republicans are scared of their own shadows in Congress. The rhinos, the Republicans in name only, that currently are. I've written this extensively. I mean, as long as the Republican Party is a Me Too Democratic establishment party, Republican Party is going to have a very hard time winning back the presidency. And of course, they don't want to be called racist. They don't want the New York Times to write anything nasty about them. They don't want to be shut out from the Christmas invitations at the White House and whatever. So there's very little courage these days in the Republican Party in Congress. And I have no real. I think the American people need to keep pushing it I think the American people need to keep saying to, especially Tea Party loyalists, demanding that Republicans in Congress, like first the Tea Party loyalists will vote out the Democrats and then they'll vote out the Republicans. I mean, this is getting to be, Congress has a 16% approval rating. I continue to wonder why it's so high. But Obama's going to limp through the next few years. Obamacare, even if he does not get impeached, will certainly cripple his presidency. And then you've got other disasters on the horizon. The stock market bubble is certain to burst. Eventually, we're at, as long as we're in almost 60 months in a long bull market. That's about as long as these bull markets have tended to last. And when the stock market bubble bursts, it's going to be very painful for millions of Americans, including fixed income Americans who have their money in 401ks or IRAs invested in the stock market, including in mutual funds. At any rate, and other disasters on the horizon. Foreign policy is shambles. The Muslim Brotherhood has largely taken over the Middle East. Egypt's trying to throw out the Muslim Brotherhood, going to have criminal trials of President Morsi, in which Obama's brother, Hillary Clinton, are all going to be named as complicit in helping this now criminal organization, so designated in Egypt. And of course, the American press won't cover much of what's said in Egypt about the Obamas. That'll be covered up as well for the American public. But as long as the American public gets their Obama phones, I guess everything's rosy.
Do you think if there is a turnover in Congress and more Tea Party types are elected, they'll throw out Boehner?
Well, I think Boehner is probably constantly on life support anyway. I mean, the next challenge is going to be what they're going to do with the debt ceiling. And my guess is Boehner's rapidly trying to figure out a way to cave on that before it even becomes a contest. Now Paul Ryan seems to be helping to engineer ways for Boehner to cave. I don't expect the Republicans to be able to stop the Democrats from spending. It's going to take the kind of crisis you're seeing in the European Union before there's any consciousness of austerity programs in the United States. I don't know how we're going to implement austerity programs. So many Americans are becoming increasingly dependent on government aid. We're going to see a test of that when unemployment insurance, the extension to 99 weeks runs out here. See if Congress has the will to keep that in place. My guess is if Congress does not keep pumping money out to an increasing percentage of Americans, you're going to have massive problems, social unrest and other problems in the United States. Look at the number of people who are on food stamps, the percentage of Americans who are on food stamps. Without pumping these Obama dollars into the economy and printing money and having the Federal Reserve buy it, this great Ponzi scheme eventually will collapse. And when it does, it's going to be very painful.
Dr. Corsi, there appears to be a groundswell of a pushback, and maybe we saw a glimpse of it during the pushback on what happened to Phil Robertson, the Duck Dynasty, and the LGBT. Do you think that's got any momentum to it?
It's the first time, I think, that you see the LGBT political lobby rebuked by the American public. And at some point, the pendulum always does swing. It's just, I think it's going to take a real crisis for people to repudiate the socialism we've been under. And with the Republican Party is spending, Me Too spending, the same as the Democrats. They just want to spend a little less, and they think they can do it better. But the Democrats and Republicans are very much alike. And once you've started spending, it's like de Tocqueville said, once the people realize they can vote themselves goodies out of the public treasury, the only thing that will stop this is a ultimate crash like you're seeing in Europe. And the austerity programs, you want to look at the future of where the United States has got to be headed eventually. You look to Greece, because eventually that's where we end up. In the history of the world, deficit spending and debt has never been bubbles have never sustained indefinitely forever.
Yeah.
And deficit spending has never worked forever. It comes to an end.
All right, let me switch gears just a little bit. Still down on the vein here that we're in, but part of the Obamacare concern is the releasing of your personal identity, especially to navigators who don't even have a background check, and yet the government seems to want to spy on everything that moves. How dangerous is this?
Well, extremely dangerous. I mean, the government shows not only the proclivity to want to know everything, all your emails, all your telephone conversations, pry into your computers, know what you're watching on television, collect all your credit card data. But they also seem to want to hand this over to the IRS if they don't like you, or to use it to prosecute you in some way, for something you did who knows when, or to harass you, or who knows what the government's doing for people who aren't speaking up. I mean, what Edward Snowden did was he showed that, again, the lies, the pattern of lies. The NSA is told that, oh no, we only keep metadata. Well, yes, except maybe for the boyfriends and girlfriends of the NSA employees who want to pry on their former spouses and lovers. I mean, it's a joke. If the government has all this information, we've been warned again for centuries that governments with information use the information to imprison the people. And the proof of that was, the Gestapo. And by the time the Gestapo came in and took the Jews away, they'd inventoried and surveyed the German population so much they didn't have to confiscate the property of the Jews. They said, well, wait a minute. You said on this survey you had a gold necklace in that drawer. Where is it?
Whoa. Whoa. What do you think long-term will happen to the faith community? I mean, do you think it's just going to slowly be pushed into a corner and silenced?
Well, it depends on whether the faith community wants to continue believing in God. If the faith community wants to abandon God, then it doesn't have a very bright future. And increasingly, we're in a secular society, and the current trend is to ridicule those who believe in God, to assume that they must be ignorant or stupid. The sophisticates, we haven't had this much sophistication for atheism since the height of decadence of the Roman Empire. They were pretty sophisticated back then.
Pardon me?
None of them believed in God. They didn't need God. What do they need God for? They had all kinds of other, deities that they could use at will, and sexual practices and everything else they could invent to make themselves feel good. Why do they have to believe in God?
Yeah. Frightening. Well, what's your thoughts for 2014?
Well, I mean, I think, again, we're going to face at some point or other the economic reality of the Fed bubble bursting. And I'm telling people to be very cautious. If the Fed stops pumping, this cutback from $85 billion a month that we're going to buy our own debt to $75 billion is not meaningful. Go down to half or a third, stock market will freak out. People will bail out faster than, a theater running for the exits in a fire. And interest rates going up. If interest rates start creeping up, despite the Fed pumping, then that's going to be another sign. And I don't expect there to be a budget. I think the Republicans have kind of conceded. They'll let the Democrats spend whatever they want. I don't think there's going to be any fight. And again, the American people have got to get tired of this. The American people have got to fire all of Congress. The American people have got to say, okay, fine, then these counties that want us to secede and form a new state, which counties are they and how do I get there?
Wow.
I mean, this has got to be the kind of we've still got lots of constitutionally available mechanisms to use, but they're dependent on people having a political will to enforce, truth. You've got the White House has become, the citadel of lies.
I got to go, Dr. Corsi. Thank you. I appreciate you much. Thanks for your time. God bless you, and let's get